Okay, so let's kick off today's webinar. Welcome to all of you joining us today. My name is Marco Perme. I'm CEO of Gecko HRM. We titled today webinar Artificial Intelligence in HR. Is it a game changer or a legal nightmare? Probably we all kind of feel or believe that AI is or will be game changer. But our goal today, together with my colleague Vesna, will be to guide you through this journey of adopting AI in a way that hopefully it doesn't really become also a legal nightmare. The format of today's webinar will be a discussion between myself and Vesna. I think this will be quite an interesting experience. So we come from two very different perspectives. I'm, as an entrepreneur, let's say also a tech guy, geek somehow, and techno-optimist. I always look at things, from the positive side, the technologies that are coming, maybe even not asking myself what are some of the risks, but always focusing on the benefits. And on the other side, Vesna, she will introduce also herself in a minute or two, which is a little bit more cautious, looking at it more from, let's say, human rights perspective, from the perspective of personal data, privacy, ethics. And these kind of discussions actually are quite common between us. So we work together while developing our Gecko HRM applications, also when talking to our customers. And it's quite often, I would say, that we don't agree, that we have different points of view. But at the end, I believe that the results from these kind of discussions are very positive. So we are able to, help companies in the region, but also when we develop our product, we do it in a way that is on one side advanced technologically, but on the other side also respects the privacy and all other aspects that are important also from the employee or let's say customer point of view. Maybe one more ask from all of you or invitation. So during this webinar, you are welcome to ask questions. I think there should be some kind of a question and answers, Q&A button and box, chat box somewhere in your Zooms. Please ask questions. We will try to answer those questions either during the webinar or at the end. The more the provocative questions are, the better it is for us because we can make this webinar more interesting for all of us. Okay, so let's start maybe just for an intro, a bit more about myself and my background so that you understand also my point of view and my let's say, interests. So I'm CEO of Gecko HRM. Gecko HRM is a solution for digitalizing HR processes. We call it all-in-one because we cover more or less all the processes in a typical HR department. We are proud of our powerful analytics, and now lately also proud of all the AI capabilities that we are building in. A lot of experiences, a lot of discussions, and we want to share some of those experiences and discussions also today with you. We first met with Vesna, actually it was quite long ago, probably. But let's say that the first way of very intense cooperation was during the GDPR introduction. Probably a lot of you remember this was in 2018. This was the first time, I believe, that myself as an HR tech entrepreneur needed to think about, how some kind of a European regulation affects our processes, how it affects how we build our product, how we discuss things with our customers. This is also the time when Vesna became part of our product development. She was discussing things with our developers, architects, product manager, because it became really, really important that from the ground up, so how we build products, how we think about new functionalities, everything is in line with, the GDPR regulation that was coming into effect at that time. And now I believe is the second time in recent history where we have a similar situation. So something new is coming. We are all very enthusiastic about all the capabilities, all the possibilities, but on the other hand, also we need to take care that all our decisions, technicals, process-wise, are sustainable in a way that future and current regulation actually enables and support this kind of use cases. So maybe before we jump, Vesna, into actual discussion, also your introduction, where you come from, yeah.
Yeah.
Invited.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. So, hi to everybody. I'm happy to that you have joined this webinar. Mare already told quite some about me. So I am a lawyer in the background, with a background in legal topics in relation to technology. In America, they say tech lawyer, tech attorney. That would be a appropriate description. For the past 2 decades, or actually 22 years, I have been working with IT companies on matters of regulatory compliance and data management in relation to various software products and services. This period includes some very good stories and also some bad stories. Sometimes companies they start working with a legal person proactively, like Mara was describing. That is also the reason why I like working with Gecko, is the proactive approach. So they involve you already early in the phase. But many times it actually happened that they involve you when they enter into a contract negotiation with more sophisticated clients that would usually come from a regulated industry, be it financial services or like critical infrastructure. So looking back at my career, I can say that I have had a front row seat as to how the regulatory landscape has evolved. So when I started out, the focus was more or less, even if you would open the contract and if you look contracts, how the IT contracts looked like 20 years ago, it was all about intellectual property compliance, relatively modest forms of personal data protection. So it was, whether do you follow all the required intellectual property requirements, and then the issues whether our software is capable of being patented. So this was actually the bulk of the conversation. And then year by year, in the last decade, this is really very obvious, is how the regulation has evolved. And we started stretching traditional legal concepts, that were written in times when contracts were written for purchase of cars, for purchase of houses, for purchase of pencils and paper. And they were made, and so that's why they were in their origin, they're very traditional. So when you are in the IT system, which is always like in the frontier of innovation, so you have to stretch all these traditional legal concept and expand. So what then happened in the last decade was the enhanced personal data laws, electronic communication, cybersecurity frameworks, also civil law advancement, for example, digital signature, which was again a new concept, how to sign and conclude a contract. And now the AI regulation. So, and the pace, I think, is only accelerating. I just want to conclude with this thought. While it's easy to see lawyers primarily as gatekeepers who like to say no. And I think also looking back, and with my age, I have some age, I can conclude also knowing my colleagues that the lawyers like to themselves to be put in this mental frame. So it's it's better to say no, or you just list all the obligations, or you list all the requirements. It is very difficult to be a proper compliance assistant as a lawyer, especially because it requires, if you really want to add value, that you really understand the technology. So you understand your client, what they are doing, what they want to achieve, because only then you can actually build a appropriate product or appropriate framework that is not just compliant from legal perspective, but it also, what I think is the most important, provides trust with the customers. So that's about me.
So also, this is basically also how I see it and how we work also with
Yeah.
our clients, companies. So a legal and compliance perspective as an enabler and something that can prevent us from having problems in the future, and not just as some kind of a gatekeeper and stopper of innovation. Yeah, okay. So maybe Vesna, before we go specifically now into regulation regarding AI and how companies should approach this, especially HR departments and HR leaders. Maybe also my take on where I see AI adoption currently is in HR. I have this privilege to talk to HR leaders from regions, so from, let's say, the Central Eastern Europe, especially where we come from, so Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, almost every day. Honestly, I see a lot of fear of missing out. Maybe some of attendees today also can relate to this. So a lot of, we need to do something, anything, but we need to do something because there is a pressure, it's a peer pressure between the professional colleagues. It's a hierarchy pressure within the companies. My take here would be just don't panic, whatever you read on the internet and all the use cases and everything that people are discussing that companies already use, much of this is a little bit of a hype. So it is quite okay to start thinking about it, but don't rush too fast. Think about the use cases, think about where it brings value, and what we'll be discussing today is how to use AI responsibly. Today, I mean, AI is everywhere. Also, HR is catching up. I see this, when preparing a job advertisement. Even, for example, with the performance management processes, preparing some well-defined goals and so on. But honestly, it's nothing like what's happening in marketing or in some customer communication departments. So marketing today, I would say, is really revolutionized in terms of preparing content, communicating through different channels, also in contact centers, chatbots. This is very, very, very intense currently. I think many things will change in the next 2-3 years. HR, yes, a lot of experimental projects, a lot of trying, but not really that transformative. But we expect this also to happen. What I miss quite a lot, in all this hurry and maybe even a little bit of nervousness, is talking about responsible AI. So how we can implement AI in use cases where it really brings value. It's not just that it's fancy, but it really brings value. And that we do it in a way that is responsible towards our employees. Also, obviously, this is more or less the same, also compliant with the existing and future regulation. Later, we will probably also talk a little bit about, what are those technological tools, use cases, processes where AI can be integrated in this responsible way that brings also value. But maybe before we go into this, Vesna, what is the current regulatory landscape? So what should an HR leader be careful of? Which are the laws, the regulation, what is coming, what is the timeline here? So how should we ground our decision related to AI today and having also insight what is coming in the near and midterm future.
Yeah, so apart from the domain HR regulation, which is not topic of today's webinar, I would underline, of course, still GDPR. GDPR is still here. GDPR and is or EU RT AI Act is complementary to GDPR. So GDPR stays as it is. It's still, I always say that in the HR, at least in Slovenia and throughout the region, not everywhere in Europe, because it's different, there are different legal regimes, but I think if you, in the HR field, the compliance with GDPR is the easiest, predominantly because, you know, the legal base for data processing is the law. And what is actually outside of the regular scope of HR data gathering is then subject to consent. But more or less from that perspective, I see that the GDPR was not a big issue for HR departments. Now we do have EU IE Act, which has it's really complex piece of legislation. It is just a general framework. Many more subordinated regulation will come out of this regulation issued by the European Commission, by also various standards that will be issued by the industry directly. So as for but again, HR in a way, one can say this is good and one can argue it's bad, is that HR has been placed in the AI regulation as IA technology with high risks, which if you think about that makes sense, right? HR, whatever you do whatever you do in the field of HR can impact the career prospect of an employee. It can also impact the livelihood. It can impact, you know, the fundamental human rights, you know, which is a prohibition of discrimination, etc. So as such, any AI systems that will handle employment-related topics will be subject to higher levels of regulation, which means that providers of such technology will need to conform with the requirements that are set, but on the other hand, also deployers, so the users, will also have obligations to comply with. More obligation is, of course, put on the providers of the systems and not so much of the deployers. As for the time frame, we are talking about that these parts of the regulation that regulate high risks AI system will come into effect on 2nd August 2026, so which is next year. But this doesn't mean now that everybody is waiting. It is. I would think it's more. If I need to compare it with GDPR, I think more preparation would be required. But provided, however, what is very this we discussed, Mare, already. What would be, in my view, a very important point to note is that identification of synergies between GDPR compliance or existing procedures and protocols that are in place with the requirements from the AI regulation. So I need to really understand and capitalize, because on some aspects, GDPR and EU AI Act have various touch points. So one could, in one way, in one go, kind of regulate certain aspects. For example, you know, one of the obligations of users, so-called deployers, would be to provide for technical and organizational measures And in that way, you can also benefit, from the technical organizational measures that were put in place for GDPR, for example.
So you mentioned that most probably of use cases in HR will be considered high risk. So high risk is some kind of a very strict definition probably within the EU.
Yeah. So let me just, because it's always better, so I will not paraphrase, but why is it so? So there are two segments. Why is this a high risk? So first one is the systems that are intended to be used for the recruitment or the selection process, because usually that kind of systems always have some sort of profiling mechanisms within. So here there is even no need for any decision to be made by the AI system. It is just the pure fact that you are using AI for selection purposes or for the recruitment purposes. Yeah, and the other segment are systems that are intended to be used to make decisions with legal effects, and that will affect the legality of your employment relations, the promotions, termination of work-related contracts, or will allocate work based on individual behavior.
So we could probably say, I don't know if this is good news for us. I mean, we will handle it, but anyway, so for HR technology, so that HR departments probably are what the most, let's say, the most sensitive area within a typical business, because with GDPR it was much more complexity on the marketing and sales side, because we needed to get consent from our customers or potential customers. It looks like now that part will be quite easy. But HR is becoming, the hotspot of AI business.
Correct. I agree. That is why I said in the beginning that I think the GDPR for HR departments, I mean, it's not a piece of cake, obviously not, but it was, I think it was much easier than what is coming in terms of regulatory compliance.
So one is the high risk system, and this is
there are in principle, So if I just classify, I mean, the regulation, of course, is much more detailed, but for the purposes of this webinar, I would classify IE systems into three categories. So first are the prohibited ones. This we already know as of 2nd of February 2024. This regulation in this particular aspect, what is prohibited to be managed by the AI tools is clear, it's in place. So this is the first category, what is absolutely prohibited. So then it is high risk, and then it is lower risk. And now for the lower risk, there are two categories, ones that still require some sort of transparency, and the ones, for example, like, that there are no requirements whatsoever. So as for shall we tackle? So what is absolutely prohibited, or how would you like to?
What is in HR? What are the some kind of use cases in the HR that are completely no-goes, at least in Europe?
So definitely it would be something that would explore or exploit the vulnerabilities of certain categories of people, because like you are either like disabled, you are female, you are mother, single mother with a child. So this is prohibited. So you are not allowed to exploit the vulnerabilities of an individual. Then definitely all these psychological manipulative actions that would distort behavior, for example, social scoring. But okay, it could also be part of HR. Evaluating person's likelihood of committing criminal offense. So in this, for example, I can imagine you incorporating this into your selection processes, or like selection IT tools that you have, that you would dismiss those, who have some potential to become criminals. Facial recognition databases, etc. So these are ones that are within the territories of EU totally prohibited.
So this is not what we are thinking about in Gecko, but I was on a event a year or two ago where a company, a Slovenian company, was very proud that they introduced a system where they were tracking everything that employees were doing. So, for example, how they were using their tools, how they were communicating, and then they were calculating a score of who might leave in the next 12 months. Is this even allowed or not? Is this high risk or is it an acceptable risk system?
So, I mean, one would really need to understand the details, but like on a first glance, as of February 2nd this year, this is a prohibited AI system, which means it's prohibited, it's not allowed to be used or to put on the market of the EU.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, but so we have in Gecko, basically we have some more, I would say, down to earth ideas, and I would like to check with you, what do you think about these ideas, or maybe not just ideas, some of these things are actually already in the product. So we have been testing now for the last months internally in our company with Gecko team, with Gecko and the Gilcon team, and now in the following month we are actually introducing this also to our customers, a system where we do so-called summarizations. So, for example, let's imagine a team lead. Team lead is preparing to have a performance review with his or her team member. And as part of this performance review, also a lot of feedbacks come from different colleagues. So one colleague would maybe comment, if this specific team member is responsible. The other one would comment that he or she has a lot of knowledge or not, and so on. So a lot of texts. And for team lead, this is quite stressful to kind of put together all those feedbacks and to create some kind of unified message for the team members. So this is where you excel and this is where you need to improve. And this is basically what we already have now also in Gecko implemented. So what do you think about this kind of use case? How would it be categorized? And also related to that, what do the users of this kind of system, the companies, need to take care, and what do we need as a tool provider need to do so that we are compliant now and also in the future?
So, I mean, the first question would be, is this just pure? So, would this function only summarize something? And based on this summary, there will be some legal effects. Will there be any decision made based on this? So this is so I would say it is but again it implies how it is built. So what are the structural elements of this feature? I would say that it is a high risk. That it is a high risk because it falls into, I would, as described before, into the second category of high risk HR systems. But now, provided, however, since, as I said, a high risk chapter, a high risk system chapter of the regulation will be put in place next year in August. Mm-hmm. Until then, the European Commission has to issue certain additional explanatory explanation as to what exactly really fits within the definition of high risk. Mm-hmm. Because the regulation already provides for some exceptions. So, for example, if this, for example, your functionality is really limited to a very narrow procedural task, which, it is, right? Or if it aims to improve the result of a previously already completed human activity, or it is a preparatory task of an assessment, then the AE regulation says that in such case, such systems still will need to be registered as a high risk, but then all the obligations that are imposed otherwise the provider is exempt from fulfilling all these heavy duty obligations.
So
But this is still at this point of time really unclear. And this is like also my message. One is that you take into your hand like the EU Act, but it is really, I think we will see at least 30 or 40 additional documents that will be either of an explanatory note or it will have some, more regulatory impact.
So, but probably it is important for us to, so we are introducing this kind of helpful feature, I would say, even within our company, the feedback was great. It really saves a lot of time and provides value. But we need to be careful, to design this process in a way that we are prepared to whatever it comes, in the following year through this kind of additional documents.
And I would also add this and how it is used. So,
And how
how
it is
it is
used, yeah.
used, like, is it really, you make your decision about promoting someone based on this document generated by your system, or there is still some human oversight or some human involvement?
Yeah, so
It's
what we
a
are trying
combination,
to
yeah.
do is there is always complete transparency, and the humans are in control. Humans can always see how these summaries were made of, and also have access to the actual text, not just the summary. Maybe because a kind of a funny fact, what we also found out is, yes, we do want to summarize some texts, but we don't want to suggest to team leads, to managers, to create feedbacks or to create goals with, for example, ChatGTP, because it was just a word salad, to say it as it is. So it was so undistinct and so polished that then even the AI summarization was just not working because everything was, very similar to each other. So our goal is, and I would also put as some kind of a recommendation for our audience, that you to be very careful which part of internal communication you let's say support with AI, because you can end up with very generic kind of communication which has actually no value.
I agree.
Maybe another use case. This is also something that we are currently piloting. So for this first one that we discussed now, summaries, honestly, I was hoping that we could go without high risk, but obviously we'll need to wait for additional explanations from EU. The second one, I believe, is quite clearer how it will be categorized. So what we do is we are putting flags on incoming job applications based on the CV and all the text provided by job applicants, comparing this to our job requirement, and then flagging all the job applicants, which is appropriate, which is not appropriate. No decision is taken automatically, but this is a suggestion for the recruiter on which job applications he or she should focus or prioritize and which not. So what do you think about this?
High risk.
It is. Why? But I mean,
this is
not
like
making any decision. Just
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. In the process of recruitment,
yeah,
selection of your future employees, there is no decision required. It is just just the fact that you are using AI system to analyze and to filter job applications, which you do, right?
Okay.
It is a sort of a filtering.
Yeah. And if this is high risk, what?
I think even the last case, I would consider again at first glance, without knowing really all the details that will still be issued, but I would argue that the second case is even more high risk than the second one that just makes the summary of various opinions documents.
This is also what I think. So this job application flagging is, I would say, more
because
risky.
it is a profiling sort of profiling always, regardless whether decision is taken or not, is by the regulation considered as high risk HR.
But let's say that we want to use this kind of system because it's not forbidden, it's just high risk. What does it mean for a company, not for us as we are building the products, but for companies that use this kind of systems? I think they are called in this regulation, in EU AI Act, they are deployers, if I believe right.
They are called deployers, yes, the ones who use.
So what
So
do they need to do? So what are the technical things that they need to take care of?
yeah, so it's quite extensive duties. So first, they need to put in place technical organizational measures. Um, So to ensure that the system is used in accordance with all the documentation that you have written and that you have to submit to them, they need to ensure there is a human oversight, which means that the people who are working with the system, they have the necessary competence. There is always, the stop button that you can press so that you can always interfere with the system. Then a very important category is the input data, so that a user, so the deployer, is able to verify that the data that is getting into the AI system is relevant and it is sufficiently representative. So, in order to allow the AI system to really make a correct decision. Then is, of course, the monitoring duty. So a deployer must advise provider as if they suspect something is going wrong, if there has been an incident or something, then they need to keep the logs for 6 months. Um, there is an explicit obligation that the Workers' Council needs to be involved prior to deployment. So if such, of course, is mandatory, it is not mandatory for each and every company, at least in Slovenia, no. Deployers need to make a data protection impact assessment. And there are some specific obligations if you are a deployer from the public sector.
What about consent? So for example, a candidate for the job need to consent to anything before the system flags his or her application?
So this is a question of GDPR. So what is currently being discussed and what has also been lately issued a couple of months ago or so by the European data privacy supervisor is that as long as there are no sensitive personal data, there is like no consent required. And the deployers, in that case, employers, can of course rely on the legitimate interest.
Mhm.
But in order to rely on a legitimate interest, it's not just you say it's a legitimate interest, you really need to substantiate all three requirements so that there is a legitimate interest in employer introducing this new tool, that it is that it does not override the rights and the rights of, granted to employee, the fundamental rights granted to employee, and that there is necessity in implementing this decision. So it is again a complex kind of task to be undertaken, but I believe everybody will be using this legal base. But having said that, GDPR still applies even if if the personal data is processed based on legitimate interest. So there is a specific article in the GDPR, which is Article 22, which says that the data subject shall have the right not to be subject to a decision which is based solely on automated processing, unless so it is necessary for the contract, or if the law says so, and the law will be, the EU AI Act, or it's based on the consent of the data subject, so employee. In that case, also, if you remember, we were discussing uh, that deployer or employer in that case would also need to be able to precisely explain to the employee the logic behind the system, so that employee can actually verify whether the decision has been made based on valid input and that all relevant circumstances have been taken into account.
This will be quite a challenge from a technical point of view. We know that even the best scientists in the world currently do not know how the current wave of generative AI actually works and how it makes decisions. So we will see how it goes. Okay.
But it's very interesting, Mara. I don't know if you have read that, but for example, these generative AI like chat GTPs, they are at the moment, they are not considered to be high risk AI systems.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. But they are regulated a little bit differently. I mean,
They are,
you
yes.
check, but there is
It's
a
more
special
true
section
transparency.
for so-called the so-called large language models. But if we touched, these kind of a chat GPT, so the chat tools that we currently
Mhm.
use, so everybody is using it these days. Some use the free version, some use the paid version.
Mhm.
And I think it also brings a lot of value when you're creating emails and doing
Sure.
different stuff with the content. So, what would be your recommendation for HR departments? Should they encourage using this? Should they limit it? If they limit it, how? So, what is allowed usage and what is not? So, what would be some kind of a, let's say, safe way of doing it, but still that you are not lagging behind, so that you are in step with the progress?
So as of February this year, the part of AI Act that deals with so-called AI literacy took effect. So which means that all providers and all deployers of ChatGPTs, among others, um, are obliged to put it like a very simple terms, to make sure that the users, so the employees in that case, have sufficient knowledge,
Mhm.
understanding, and skills to understand how to use ChatGTP in that particular matter. So my suggestion would be that before you start formally really encouraging everybody to use it, that first you perform and go through some sort of general training or specific trainings for particular groups of people, because in various departments they use it in a different way, some
Uh-huh.
with more, how to say, potential wrongdoings, some with less. So in that way, the use would be so everybody would know why to use it, how to use it, and what not to do. In that context, it is also recommended that companies adopt AI usage policy. So, and they expressly state, which, for example, version of ChatGTP is allowed, what is not allowed. For example, you are not allowed to put personal data inside. You are not allowed to copyrighted material, etc. So before formally start encouraging people to use it, because of course it can bring many benefits, just make sure that employees understand.
So I already see some problems or let's say risks here. So if let's say I'm an employee of a company and I rely too much on ChatGPT, ChatGPT returns some weird and wrong information, but I use this information in a business process. There are some problems, maybe even some damage for the company. Then the company presses on me, and I would say I didn't get any education.
Yeah.
Probably on the court, I would win as an employee.
As employee, you would win, yeah. Yeah. Because there was a recent Slovenian court decision that stated that you cannot blame employee for if the employer hasn't put in place training awareness programs. So this was a case with phishing. So there was a woman employee that opened a phishing email and then transferred 75,000 euros to some account. Yeah. And then the employer was not in a position to get refunded. So it was the obligation, it is obligation and responsibility of an employer to act prudently and to put a preventive measures in place. So to enlighten the employees so that that kind of practices are not allowed.
So if we start slowly wrapping up and
Mhm.
summarizing what we discussed, so probably it's a good idea to start educating all our employees, regardless of the industry that we are if these employees somehow use AI for their daily work, we as a companies are now even obliged under the European regulation to provide training how to use AI system. Is this true?
Correct. Correct.
When we are starting introducing AI systems also in our existing processes, like we discussed performance management in HR or legal or recruiting, this is when it becomes quite serious. We need to understand, although everything is not yet clear, but still we need to understand what are possible consequences of including this kind of AI systems in the process. I would also say here, before maybe also ask you to kind of a wrap up, is that what is equally important for me is that we in HR try to use AI in use cases where we really see business value. I see a lot of, oh, let's use AI for this just because it's possible. But at the end of the day, if we go and calculate what is the benefit, the business benefit, either it's, employee experience improves or some cost cutting or whatever, we see very little impact. So my first recommendation for all of our entities today is focus on use cases where you can easily calculate business value, where there really is a pain, where there is a problem for the solution, and not just applying some solutions for the problems that do not exist. I don't know, maybe also Vesna from your side, some final thoughts before we check if there are any questions also in the questions and answers box.
No, I mean, for me, what would really be super important is that across the board, you align on the understanding the terminology. Because, I'm sure if you really are not like into it, it's super difficult to understand, what is AI system, what is AI model, so what now is ChatGPT, for example. So understanding the terminology first, and this is something, that should be like IT compliance, HR kind of multi-department task force. So I would identify what has been used and in what role. I would definitely go for a formal company AI policy, because you never know if your employees are using the free versions of ChatGPT while performing their task. Like, you need to have a view on that. You need to take a stand on that, whether this is allowed or not, or if it is allowed under what conditions. And set up really, as I said, a team who starts reviewing the regulatory requirements. And also what is very important, to try to identify the synergies with the various protocols and processes that already exist in place because of GDPR. If you are a financial institution with DORA, or if you are critical infrastructure, with the NIS directive.
Okay. So we got a few questions during our webinar. I believe this first one is from you. It must have been sent when we were discussing, who is actually making decisions. So the question is, this is Vesna for you. If AI makes a decision and humans approved it, is that still a decision made by AI or not?
So making decisions is not what makes AI, because AI can also help and assist recommending something, right? So I think it is still AI.
So basically, yeah. My experience is, when AI starts suggesting decisions, sooner or later people become lazy and we just say yes.
True. Which is true.
Just the way we use Google Maps today. We don't really challenge, the suggestion from the Google. We just drive the way Google instructs us to drive. So, okay, another question. This is more on me. I believe, which AI features will you be developing in Gecko this year? So what we have done until now is already developed the feature that helps team leads prepare for performance reviews. So this is the summarization part of all the feedbacks. We will be also helping team leads with goal preparation during the performance reviews. We are also planning to introduce a Gecko chatbot. So Gecko will basically move into Microsoft Teams and Slack also probably, so that you will be able to talk to Gecko, not just use the user interface. So these are our, let's say, short and mid-term plans in our roadmap. So we have another question. It's a bit longer, so I'll just read it. Since AI is in HR is high risk, but at the same time, ChatGPT is not classified as high risk. Is it possible to use ChatGPT for what Marco mentioned, putting flags on job applications? If company has a policy that ChatGPT is allowed to be used by HR employees, are they allowed to use it for classifying job applications? Really, if you get 100 applications, probably decision maker will look only the ones with best flags. So there is no Gecko, there is just ChatGPT and incoming job applications, and we are classifying job applications with ChatGPT. Is this okay? Is it high risk or not?
So whether ChatGPT is considered to be high risk or not risk is not formally known yet. So, but this is like, when you read various materials, various documents, at least the old versions of models are not considered high risk, but the new models, there are also some people suggesting that they are so advanced that they need to be classified, that they have systematic risks, etc., etc. So at the moment, I would think that if you would use it, that it is important how you are using it.
Mhm.
So you are using it for a high risk
Use case.
use case, sort of. So you are converting it from base, which is not considered high risk, into high risk AI tool. So that's why my first reaction would be that it is high risk still.
And this is common sense, I guess. Also, this legislation is kind of catching up with, the EU. I believe that EU Act was written when there was no ChatGPT. And
Correct. And then there was a whole section added just because of the ChatGPT. Yeah. Yeah. It caused some problems to Brussels. Yeah. Correct.
Okay. Good. Okay, we have another question. This is, I suspect that I know how you will answer, Vesna, but still I will ask. So if AI saves us a lot of time, let's say that we save 2 FTEs, but it's so legal. So maybe if we don't know if it's legal, would you still use it? What would you say to a company that wants to save, let's say, 2 FTEs, which is quite a lot?
Don't use it. I mean, I would personally say don't use it if it's explicitly prohibited to use it. So if it is, a shadow area, we could perhaps perform data impact assessment and then see, there are some measures that you can counterbalance all the risks. But it also depends, whether how risk averse the company is. There are some entrepreneurs that they just don't care. So me personally, if I would I would be in ownership of this process, I would most likely not use it if it's explicitly prohibited.
Okay. Understood. Okay, so I think we came to an end. Maybe just for conclusion, within the next 2 years or even sooner, let's say the next year, I believe that more or less every HR department in European Union will need to be able to explain how their AI tools work, how they make decisions. We'll need to be able to monitor these tools or basically stop using them, because all the current legislation that we discussed today will come into effect. So our recommendation, I think we both agree here with Vesna, is that we need to get ready for this future today, start thinking about AI responsibly, and of course also At Gecko HRM, we are absolutely committed to this kind of thinking, providing solutions with AI today that will be also future-proof. So thank you for all of you for attending today's webinar. And I hope we meet, see, or hear each other on our future events and webinars. So take care and thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.